Chapter 1. Dead bracken rustled beneath Lionblaze's paws as he stalked through the forest. Above the leafless trees, the sky was dark and empty. Terror raised the hairs on the young warrior's neck, and he shivered from ears to tail tip. This is a place that has never known the light of StarClan. He padded on, skirting clumps of fern and nosing under bushes, but he found no sight or scent of other cats. I've had enough of this, he thought, tugging his tail free from a trailing bramble. Panic sparked in his mind as he stared at the darkness that stretched away between the trees. What if I never find my way out of here? Looking for me? Lionblaze jumped and spun around. Tiger Star! The massive warrior had appeared around the edge of a bramble thicket. His tabby pelt shone with a strange light that reminded Lionblaze of the sickly glow of fungus on dead trees. You've missed a lot of training, Tiger Star meowed, padding forward until he stood a tail length from the ThunderClan warrior. You should have come back sooner. No, I shouldn't, Lionblaze blurted out. I shouldn't have come here at all, and you never should have trained me. Brambleclaw isn't my father. You're not my kin. Tiger Star blinked once, but he showed no surprise, not even a flick of his ears. His amber eyes narrowed to slits, and he seemed to be waiting for Lionblaze to say more. You knew, Lionblaze whispered. The trees seemed to spin around him. Squirrelflight isn't the only cat who kept secrets. Of course I knew, Tiger Star shrugged. It's not important. You were willing enough to learn from me, weren't you? But blood isn't everything, Tiger Star snarled, his lip curled, showing the glint of sharp fangs. Just ask Firestar. Lionblaze felt his neck fur begin to bristle as fury coursed through him. Firestar's a finer warrior than you ever were. Don't forget that he's not your kin either, Tiger Star hissed softly. There's no point defending him now. Lionblaze stared at the dusk-lit warrior. Does he know who my real father is? You knew all along that I wasn't Firestar's kin, he growled. You let me believe a lie. Tiger Star twitched one ear. So? Rage and frustration overwhelmed Lionblaze. Leaping into the air, he threw himself at Tiger Star and tried to push him over. He battered at the tabby warrior's head and shoulders, his claws unsheathed, tearing out huge clumps of fur. But the red haze of fury that filled his head made him clumsy, unfocused. His blows landed at random, barely scratching Tiger Star's skin. The huge tabby tom went limp, letting himself drop to one side and hooking one paw around Lionblaze's leg to unbalance him. Lionblaze landed among the bracken with a jolt that drove the breath from his body. A heartbeat later, he felt a huge paw clamp down on his shoulders, pinning him to the ground. I've taught you better than that, little warrior, Tiger Star taunted him. You're out of practice. Taking a deep breath, Lionblaze heaved himself upward. Tiger Star leaped back and crouched a fox length away, his amber eyes burning. I'll show you who's out of practice, Lionblaze panted. He forced his anger down, summoning a cold determination. All the fighting moves he had ever learned were at the tips of his claws. When Tiger Star sprang at him, he was prepared. He dived forward and hurled himself underneath his opponent's belly. As soon as Tiger Star's paws hit the ground, Lionblaze whipped around and landed a couple of blows on the tabby tom's hindquarters before leaping out of range. Tiger Star spun to face him. Better, he meowed, mockery still in his voice. I have mentored you well. Before Lionblaze could reply, the huge tabby darted toward him, veering aside at the last moment and lashing out with one forepaw as he passed. Lionblaze felt Tiger Star's claws rake along his side and blood begin trickling out of the scratches. Fear stabbed at him. What happens if he kills me here? Will I be really dead? His mind cleared. Tiger Star was hurtling toward him again. Lionblaze scrambled aside. He aimed a blow, but felt his claws slide harmlessly through the tabby's pelt. Too slow, Tigerstar spat. You'll have to work harder now you know that prophecy wasn't meant for you. That was for Firestar's kin, wasn't it? Lionblaze knew that the Tabby Tom was trying to make him too angry to fight. I won't listen. All I need to do is win this battle. He sprang at Tigerstar again, twisting in the air as he had been taught during those long nighttime visits, and landed squarely on the massive Tabby's broad shoulders. Digging in with his claws, he stretched forward and sank his teeth into Tigerstar's neck. Tigerstar tried the same trick of going limp and pulling Lionblaze down with him, but this time Lionblaze was ready. He wriggled out from underneath the heavy body, battering with his hind paws at Tigerstar's exposed stomach fur. I'm not falling for that trick twice, he hissed. Tigerstar struggled to get up, but blood was pouring from a gash in his belly. He stumbled down again, rolling onto his back. Lionblaze planted one forepaw on Tigerstar's chest and held the other, claws extended against his neck. The tabby glared up at him. For a heartbeat, fear flashed in his blazing amber eyes. Do you really think you could kill me? He growled. You'd never do it. No. Lionblaze sheathed his claws and stepped back. You're already dead. He turned and stalked away, his pelt still bristling and all his senses alert in case Tigerstar followed and leaped on him again. But there was no sound from the dark warrior, and soon he was left behind among the endless trees. Lionblaze's mind whirled. He had beaten Tigerstar. Maybe I do have power after all. But how can I, if I'm not one of the three? He paused, scarcely seeing the tangling undergrowth and the trees of the dark forest all around him. Do I want to know who my parents really are? He wondered. Does it even matter? Maybe it was best to let his clanmates accept him for who they thought he was, so he could go on striving to improve his fighting skills. I'm already the best fighter in ThunderClan. I know I can be a great warrior. Ashfur is dead, he meowed out loud. And Squirrelflight won't reveal her secret to any other cats. It would hurt her clanmates far too much if they knew she'd been lying to them for so long. Why not let everything stay the same? Lionblaze woke to the sun on his face. Most of the cats had already left the den. Lionblaze spotted only the gray and white pelt of Mousewhisker, who had kept guard over the camp the night before. Lionblaze's jaws stretched in a yawn. Thank StarClan I wasn't on the dawn patrol, he muttered. When he tried to get up, every muscle in his body shrieked a protest. He felt as if his body was one huge ache, from his head to his paws. Down one side, his golden tabby fur was matted with blood. I hope no cat has noticed that, he thought, as he bent his head and began cleaning up his pelt with swift, rhythmic licks. The fight with Tigerstar had been a dream, hadn't it? Lionblaze didn't understand why he should feel just as much pain and exhaustion as if it had really happened, and he had been cut, as if a living warrior had raked his claws across Lionblaze's flank. He tried not to think about it. It doesn't matter, because I'll never go back to that place, he told himself. It's over. He felt better after his grooming, with his fur fluffed up to hide the gash in his side. When he finished, he could hear the voices of several cats just outside the den, though not close enough for him to make out what they were saying. Curious, he rose to his paws, arched his back in a delicious stretch, and pushed his way through the branches into the clearing. Thornclaw was standing a couple of fox lengths away. Spiderleg sat close by, while Cloudtail paced up and down in front of them, the tip of his white tail twitching. Cloudtail's mate, Brightheart, watched him anxiously from where she sat with Ferncloud, Brackenfur, and Sorreltail. Honeyfern and Berrynose were crouched nearby, their eyes fixed on Thornclaw. Ashfur was killed by a Wind Clan cat, the golden brown Tom was declaring. It's the only possible answer. A few of his listeners nodded in agreement, though Lionblaze saw others exchanging doubtful glances. Firestar said he thought that one of us did it, Honeyfern mewed. sounding nervous to be contradicting a senior warrior. "Clan leaders have made mistakes before," Cloudtail meowed. "Firestar isn't always right."
"I'm sure none of us would kill Ashfur,"
Ferncloud added more gently.
"Why would we want to? Ashfur had no enemies."
"I wish that was true," Lionblaze thought. However much he tried to forget, that night of fire and storm was seared into Lionblaze's memory. He could hear the roar of the flames on the cliff top, and could see them licking hungrily around him and his littermates as Ashfur blocked the end of the branch they needed to scramble towards safety. Squirrelflight's confession rang in his ears again. She had told Ashfur that Lionblaze, Hollyleaf, and Jayfeather were not her kids. It was the only way to save their lives, by pretending she did not care what happened to them. But she had handed Ashfur a weapon more terrible than any flaming branch. Lionblaze knew that the Grey Warrior would have announced the truth to all the clans at the gathering. Only death had closed his jaws forever and kept the secret safe.
"Lionblaze! Hey, Lionblaze, are you deaf?"
Lionblaze dragged his thoughts back to the hollow to see Spiderleg waving him over with his tail.
"You were Ashfur's last apprentice,"
the Black Warrior prompted as Lionblaze padded reluctantly up to the group.
"Do you know if he'd quarreled with any cat?"
"Especially any Wind Clan cat?" Thornclaw added, with a meaningful twitch of his whiskers. Lionblaze shook his head. No," he replied awkwardly. He couldn't lie and say that Ashfur had quarreled with a Wind Clan cat, even though he wished with every hair on his pelt that it was true. Letting his clanmates believe such a thing would cause an all-out war between ThunderClan and WindClan. "I hadn't seen much of Ashfur just before he died," he added. To his relief, no other cat questioned him. "We'd know if Ashfur quarreled with a ThunderClan cat," Brackenfur insisted. "It's impossible to keep a secret around here." "If only you knew," Lionblaze thought.
"Brackenfur's right,"
Sorreltail touched her nose to her mate's ear.
"But all the same, we can't be sure that a Wind Clan cat—"
"Ashfur died on the Wind Clan border," Spiderleg interrupted. "What more do you want?"
Sorreltail turned to face him, her neck fur bristling at his scathing tone.
"I want a bit more evidence than where his body was found before I start blaming any cat."
Honeyfern and Brackenfur murmured agreement, but Lionblaze could see that most of the cats were convinced that a Wind Clan warrior was responsible for Ashfur's death. However much he worried about what that could lead to, he couldn't bury a guilty sense of relief.
"Are we going to let Wind Clan get away with this?"
Thornclaw demanded, his ears lying flat as he dug his claws into the earth.
"No!"
Berrynose leaped to his paws.
"We have to show them they can't mess with ThunderClan."
Lionblaze's belly churned as he saw the warriors cluster more closely around Thornclaw. They were behaving as if the golden-brown Tom was their leader, and seemed ready to follow him into battle to avenge their clanmate's murder.
"It would be best to attack by night," Thornclaw began. "There'll be enough moonlight to see by, and they won't be expecting trouble." "We'll see they get it, though," Spiderleg lashed his tail. "We'll head for the Wind Clan camp," Thornclaw continued. "It'll be best to split up. One raiding party can attack from this direction." "What?"
The low growl came from just behind Lionblaze. Startled, Lionblaze glanced over his shoulder to see Brambleclaw. He, along with all the other cats, had been so intent on what Thornclaw was planning that he hadn't heard the clan deputy approach.
"We're going to raid Wind Clan,"
Spiderleg explained, bunching his muscles as if he was planning to launch himself out of the camp right away.
"One of them killed Ashfur, and—" "There will be no raid on Wind Clan," Brambleclaw interrupted, a glow of anger springing up to his amber eyes. "There is no evidence that a Wind Clan cat killed Ashfur."
Lionblaze gazed at the cat he had always believed was his father. Does he know the truth? He wondered, remembering all the times that Brambleclaw had play-wrestled with him and his littermates when they were kits, and how many times he had helped them or advised them as they grew older. Squirrelflight had told Ashfur that Brambleclaw didn't know the truth, but Lionblaze had no reason to trust her now.
If he does know, he's a very good liar. As good as squirrel flight. Brambleclaw didn't wait for a response. He stalked off in the direction of the tumbled rocks that led up to the high ledge, only to halt after a couple of paces and glance back, twitching his ears to beckon Lionblaze to him. "Are you okay?" The deputy's voice was full of sympathy. "Ashfur was your mentor, after all. But we weren't close." Lionblaze didn't want to say the words aloud, but he had always known there was something wrong between himself and Ashfur. They had never known the true bond between a mentor and apprentice. Had Ashfur hated him the same way he had hated Squirrelflight? What a waste. Lionblaze wasn't even Squirrelflight's son. "I'm fine," he mumbled. Brambleclaw rested his tail tip on Lionblaze's shoulder. "I can see you're not," he mewed. "Is there anything you want to tell me? You know you can always come and talk to me." For a couple of heartbeats, Lionblaze froze. "Does Brambleclaw suspect me of killing Ashfur?" "It's hard to lose a cat you were close to," Brambleclaw went on. "But I promised you before, his death will not go unavenged." He unsheathed his long, curved claws and sank them into the floor of the hollow. Lionblaze flinched, imagining those claws tearing into the throat of the guilty cat. "If I find the cat who did this," Brambleclaw growled softly, "they will regret taking the life of a warrior and my clanmate." He turned away, padding toward the high ledge, but before he reached the foot of the rockfall, Firestar appeared from his den. He paused for a moment, looking down into the clearing. The pale sun of Leaf Bear touched his pelt, turning it to flame. Then he bounded lightly down the stones to join Brambleclaw and Lionblaze. He nodded to the group of cats surrounding Thornclaw. "What's happening?" he queried. "Some of the clan want to lead an attack on Wind Clan," Brambleclaw reported. "I didn't know we had so many mouse brains in ThunderClan." Firestar twitched his ears. "It's hard to accept the death of a warrior," he meowed loudly. "But this isn't the time for an attack. I will lead a patrol to speak with One Star, to see if he knows anything." "Of course he knows." Spiderleg had turned to face them, his neck fur bristling aggressively. "We should attack now, before we lose more warriors," Thornclaw declared. Firestar shook his head. "There's no point in stirring up trouble when there's no need," he warned. "But there is need!" Thornclaw padded forward until he stood nose to nose with his clan leader. "A warrior is dead!" Yowls of agreement rose up from the cats around him. "Ashfur must be avenged! He was a fine warrior. The whole clan respected him. No ThunderClan cat would have killed him." Lionblaze couldn't join in. It was hard enough to hide his fear and anxiety from his clanmates. They remembered Ashfur as a brave and loyal warrior. They knew nothing of the cat who had been prepared to destroy his clan to take revenge on Squirrelflight for choosing Brambleclaw instead of him. Firestar raised a paw for silence, but he was still waiting for the yowling to die down when Lionblaze spotted cats emerging into the camp from the thorn tunnel, a hunting patrol led by Sandstorm. Dustpelt, Squirrelflight, and Hollyleaf followed her into the clearing and went to drop their prey on the fresh kill pile before padding over to join the cats around Firestar.
"What's all this?"
Hollyleaf asked as she reached Lionblaze's side. Lionblaze stared at Squirrelflight, at the agony in her face as she listened to her clanmate's praise of Ashfur. He knew that she must be sharing his own thoughts, of the darkness in the gray warrior that was so well hidden from the rest of his clan. "How much do you know about how he died?" he asked himself, not wanting to meet her gaze.
"Lionblaze, what's happening?"
Hollyleaf repeated her question in a sharper tone, prodding him in the side with one paw. Lionblaze glanced at her. His sister's green eyes were haunted, and she looked as if she hadn't slept for a moon. "She looks just like how I feel," he thought. "Thornclaw and some of the others want to attack Wind Clan because of Ashfur's death," he replied. Hollyleaf's eyes widened.
"Do they really think it was a Wind Clan cat?"
she asked, a tinge of surprise in her voice. "Some of them do.
But Firestar...
Lionblaze broke off as the clan leader darted back to the tumbled rocks and leaped up onto a boulder.
Let all cats old enough to catch their own prey join here beneath the high ledge for a clan meeting, he yelled.